σε 4 άξονες. Ο ένας είναι η άνοδος του ναζισμού, η μετανάστευση, ο άλλος είναι αριστερές πολιτικές στην τοπική αυτοδιοίκηση και ο τελευταίος είναι οι επιπτώσεις της κρίσης, διέξοδοι από την κρίση και προσφάτως πρακτικές που θα μπορούσαν να βοηθήσουν προς μια αριστερή κατεύθυνση. Μέσα στην κρίση θεωρήσαμε με τους συνδιοργανωτές εδώ από το Κοινωνική Δημοκρατία ότι θα έπρεπε να μεταφέρουμε το φόκους από την Ελλάδα στην Ευρώπη, να συζητήσουμε την Ευρώπη συνολικότερα πλαίσιο και αυτή και να μην μιλάμε για την Ελλάδα και ιδιαιτερότητα. Δεν θα σας πω παραπάνω για όλα αυτά, γιατί θα ακούσω άλλες 2 εισαγωγές. Το λόγο στη Ιωάννα Μπούσα, που είναι διευθύντρια του τμήματος στο Βερολίνο, στο οποίο ανήκουν τα παραρτήματα Βρυξελών, Νέας Υόρκης και Αθήνας. Να ευχαριστήσω εκ των προτέρων τις μεταφράστριές μας για απόψε, τη Μιράντα Παπαδοπούλου και την Κατερίνα Αποστολάκη. Έπειτα θα κάνει η Ιωάννα έτσι ένα καλωσόρισμα. Έπειτα ο Πολυμέρης Βόγλης θα πει 2 λόγια για τη σειρά αυτή που σχεδιάσαμε μαζί, για το Rethinking Europe. Και ο Αντώνης Γιάκος θα κάνει μια εισαγωγή στο έργο της Σάσκια Σάσεν. Και έπειτα σύντομα, πολύ σύντομα, θα αρχίσει και η διάλεξη.
Κεντρική Ιταλία, με σκοπό να εξυπηρετήσει τα αυτοκρατορικά σχέδια ενοποίησης της Ευρώπης, ενός πολέμου που ξέσπασε μετά από μια μακρά περίοδο οικονομικής ύφεσης, εξάπλωση του εθνικισμού και διαφορίας για τους διεθνείς θεσμούς. Μετά τον πόλεμο και παρά τη διαίρεση της Ευρώπης σε δύο εχθρικά στρατόπεδα, τόσο οι ηγέτες όσο και οι λαοί της Ευρώπης ήταν αποφασισμένοι να αποτρέψουν το ενδεχόμενο ενός νέου και αυτή τη φορά ολοκληρωτικά καταστροφικού πολέμου μέσα από το συνδυασμό οικονομικής ανάπτυξης, κοινωνικής ευημερίας και διεθνούς συνεργασίας. Μετά το 1989 και την κατάρρευση των κομμουνιστικών καθεστώτων στην Ευρώπη, το όραμα της ευρωπαϊκής ενοποίησης φαίνονταν να είναι περισσότερο εφικτό από ποτέ. Αλλά ταυτόχρονα οι όροι της ενοποίησης είχαν αλλάξει δραματικά. Η οικονομική ενοποίηση δεν συμβάλλει με την πολιτική ενοποίηση και η έντονη συζήτηση για το δημοκρατικό έλλειμμα έδειχνε την αυξανόμενη ανησυχία για την ισχυροποίηση και εν τέλει την αυτονόμηση των μηχανισμών της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης πέρα από το δημοκρατικό έλεγχο των πολιτών. Πολύ περισσότερο που η λογική και οι αρχές της οικονομικής ενοποίησης υπονόμευαν την κοινωνική ευημερία που είχε κατακτηθεί με τα πολεμικά. Οι πολιτικές λιτότητας, η διάλυση του κοινωνικού κράτους, η απορρίθμιση των εργασιακών σχέσεων, η ιδιωτικοποίηση των επιχειρήσεων κοινής ωφέλειας, η ανεργία και τέλος, οι αυξανόμενες κοινωνικές ανισότητες απειλούν την κοινωνική συνοχή αλλά ακόμη και την ίδια την ανάπτυξη. Η οικονομική κρίση του 2008 και τα προγράμματα δημοσιονομικής πειθαρχίας στις υπερχρεωμένες χώρες επέτειναν την κοινωνική ανισότητα, ιδιαίτερα στην Ελλάδα, τη χώρα που επλήγει περισσότερο από κάθε άλλη στην Ευρώπη τα τελευταία 5 χρόνια από την νεοφιλελεύθερη διαχείριση της κρίσης. Ωστόσο, στην Ελλάδα η οικονομική κρίση ήταν τόσο μεγάλη και βαθιά που αποδιάφρωσε το πολιτικό σύστημα. Η αριστερά ήρθε στην εξουσία τον Ιανουάριο του 2015 για πρώτη φορά στην Ελλάδα αλλά και στην Ευρώπη σε μια συγκυρία καθόλου ευνοϊκή. Η ελληνική αριστερά για την ανάκαμψη της ελληνικής οικονομίας αλλά και μια διαφορετική πρόταση για την αντιμετώπιση του ελληνικού ζητήματος από την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Γι' αυτό άλλωστε και αντιμετωπίζει την τιμωρητική πολιτική. Σε κάθε περίπτωση και να αναφετηρεί την ελληνική κρίση, αυτό που τίθεται επιτάπητος δεν είναι μόνο το μέλλον της Ελλάδας στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, αλλά και το τι είδους Ευρώπη οικοδομείται. Με άλλα λόγια, ο τρόπος με τον οποίο θα επιληθεί το ελληνικό ζήτημα θα είναι και η ένδειξη για τις πολιτικές που θα ακολουθήσει η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση στο μέλλον και για το πού οδεύει η Ευρώπη. Με αυτές τις σκέψεις και τα ερωτήματα, το Ίδρυμα Ρόζα Λούξεμπουργκ και η Πρωτοβουλία για την Υπεράσπιση της Κοινωνίας και της Δημοκρατίας αποφασίσαμε να ξεκινήσουμε. Στόχος, να ξανασκεφτούμε τι είναι αυτό που ονομάζουμε Ευρώπη. Στο Rethinking Europe φιλοδοξούμε να συμβάλλουμε βασιστικά σε αυτό το εργαστήριο ιδεών. Σας ευχαριστώ.
αλλαγή είναι που μελετάει κυρίως στα τελευταία της βιβλία και κυρίως το τελευταίο, το Expulsions, το οποίο θα το απέδιδα εξώσεις και όχι ενδεχομένως εκτοπισμοί όπως μεταφράστηκε. Εξώσεις, αποβολές. Αυτή η έννοια ακριβώς ότι για να αλλάξουν οι παραγωγικές μορφές της παγκόσμιας οικονομίας έχουν ανάγκη, όπως και τον 16ο αιώνα, να αποστερήσουν τα υποκείμενα από τα παραγωγικά τους μέσα, από τα δικαιώματά τους, από τις ιδιότητες τις οποίες έχουν αποκτήσει σε αυτό το διάστημα μέσω του κράτους πρόνοιας, μέσω της εργατικής νομοθεσίας, μέσω του τρόπου με τον οποίο αναπτύχθηκε η μεταπολεμική δημοκρατία. Και αυτό ακριβώς σημαίνει όχι μόνο μια αποβολή δικαιωμάτων, μια αποβολή των ατόμων από το σύστημα. Μας λέει ότι αν το παλιό σύστημα του welfare state, του κράτους πρόνοιας, ήταν ενσωματωτικό, στηριζόταν στη μαζική παραγωγή, στη μαζική κατανάλωση, σήμερα το σύστημα αυτό απορρίπτει, αποβάλλει και κρατάει κατά κάποιο τρόπο τους πιο προσοδοφόρους τομείς της παγκόσμιας οικονομίας, μετατρέποντας όλο αυτό το άθυρμα των ανθρώπων, των γεών, του χώρου και ούτω καθεξής, σε στοιχεία τα οποία μπαίνουν μέσα σε αυτήν την χρηματοπιστωτική οικονομία. Με αυτή την άποψη, η κρίση αυτή την οποία περνάμε και η Ελλάδα σε αυτό το βιβλίο, στο Expulsion, είναι παραδειγματικό, η παραδειγματική χώρα της ανάλυσης. Η κρίση αυτή είναι η πρώτη μεγάλη κρίση την οποία διέρχεται η παγκοσμιοποίηση, η περίοδος δηλαδή η οποία άρχισε εδώ και 30 χρόνια. Είναι καταρχάς η αποτύπωση των μηχανισμών αυτών οι οποίες λειτουργήσαν κατά τη διάρκεια της παγκοσμιοποίησης, και αυτό δεν το λέμε ότι, και δεν το λέει η ίδια βέβαια, με ένα είδος νοσταλγίας ότι η παλιά εποχή του εθνικού κράτους ήταν καλύτερη από την εποχή της παγκοσμιοποίησης, γιατί δεν μπορεί να υπάρξει μια τέτοια εποχή, δεν μπορεί να υπάρξει δηλαδή αναδίπλωση στο παρελθόν, αλλά μέσω αυτή η παγκοσμιοποίηση, αυτά τα οποία συμβαίνουν σήμερα αποτελούν αποτυπώσεις αυτών των εξώσεων, των αποστερήσεων, των αποβολών, τις οποίες περιγράψαμε και περιγράφει στο βιβλίο της με λεπτομέρειες, αλλά ταυτόχρονα αυτή συμπυκνώνεται στις κρίσιμες καταστάσεις στις οποίες βρίσκονται χώρες, και μία από τις χώρες αυτές είναι η Ελλάδα. Σε μία προηγούμενη περίπτωση έχει περιγράψει το Μεξικό και το πώς έγιναν εκεί αυτές, όχι μόνο οι αποστερήσεις, αλλά αυτές και οι μαζικές μεταφορές πλούτου. Γι' αυτό που βλέπουμε στην Ελλάδα τώρα δεν είναι απλώς μια διαπραγμάτευση με τους ισχυρούς, ούτε είναι μια πολιτική λιτότητα όπως λέγεται στην πολιτική γλώσσα. Είναι αυτή η μεγάλη μεταβολή η οποία συντελείται, μια μεγάλη ιστορική μεταβολή, και εξ αρχής η κοινωνία και η δημοκρατία, αν θυμάστε στα κρίσιμα σεμινάρια, είχε φτάσει αυτή την κατεύθυνση, να καταλάβουμε το μέγεθος αυτής της αλλαγής στις οποίες βρίσκεται η χώρα μας. Λοιπόν, εκεί είναι το ζήτημα. Δεν είναι απλώς ένα ζήτημα το οποίο έχει να κάνει με μικρές αλλαγές ή με καπρίτσια της πολιτικής ή με κάποια στηρική πολιτική. Έχει να κάνει το πώς η Ευρώπη και η Αμερική αλλάζουν και ταυτόχρονα προκαλούν μέσα από το χρέος, μέσα από την πολιτική των θεσμών, μέσα από όλα αυτά τα οποία διαβάζουμε, το να αλλάξει οι ίδιες οι κοινωνίες η μία μετά την άλλη και να αποτυπωθούν και να ακολουθήσουν αυτή τη νέα κατάσταση. Από αυτή την άποψη πραγματικά της οφείλουμε μεγάλη χάρη, πολλές ευχαριστίες που ήρθε στην Ελλάδα. Θέλουμε να την ακούσουμε, να ακούσουμε την ανάλυση της και κυρίως να σκεφτούμε μια χώρα όπως η Ελλάδα, στην οποία επιλέγει μια αριστερή κυβέρνηση, στην οποία ο κόσμος επιλέγει να πει stop, όχι, πού πάμε, να αναρωτηθεί. Τι ακριβώς μπορούμε να κάνουμε σε αυτό το πλαίσιο. Σας ευχαριστούμε και έχετε βέβαια το λόγο.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, those were two introductions. Wow. I want to thank this wonderful place, Gas Something. Thank you. You said it. Okay, very good. And it's just phenomenal. We've visited several floors. I think you have one of the extraordinary sculptures, huh? That gas thing. I know it started with a very bad origin, but I want to thank the two Joannas, Joanna Bussemer from the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. I think half the world is more or less under your control. But insofar as it is Rosa Luxemburg, that's good kind of control.
Rosa's control, actually.
Rosa's control, right. And Joanna Meitani, you are somewhere here, there you are, who is here in Athens. I want to thank the Polymeris and Antonios. Do I have that right? Thank you very, very much for those introductions. And just so I really think of this as a working session. I want to learn from you as well. I have my own thoughts, and you two already captured some of what I am thinking. And I really would love it if we could have very robust discussion. Please correct me if I get it wrong. So there are two subjects that I want to cover. First one, if I formulate it as a question, is Greece really the oddball in this European crisis? Is Germany doing it all right? Is France doing it? The Netherlands? The UK? So I want to sort of look at Greece as part of a European dynamic, which is in fact also a North American dynamic, which is in fact a dynamic in many of the highly developed countries. So that there is a particularity to Greece that you are better equipped to market. I'm just going to throw out some thoughts, etc. Secondly, and this is truly experimental, in my new work, my new project that I call Who Owns the City, I'm looking at the top 100 cities that are recipients of corporate investment that is basically buying up pieces of those cities. This is a trend, I mean, on the one hand, it's a very old trend. On the other hand, it's a trend that is just, that sort of takes off brutally in 2008 after the crisis. A lot of this investment is simply storing capital that doesn't have a better place where to go, knowing that at one point or another those cities become very useful platforms for corporate actors, and hence you can't go wrong. On the other hand, it's literally the buying of urban land. And so I'm very interested now in the Athens case. Athens is in these top 100 cities. It's not at the top. Just to give you an example, New York got $55 billion. You know, in just 1 year, London 47 billion. Last year alone, if you take all these 100 cities, over $1 trillion. So my question then is, can this global corporate system afford to lose Athens? It can't. Athens is coming back. How it comes back, for whom? Think of this whole region. North Africa, those cities, out. Total crisis. Cairo, out. Beirut in trouble. Amman, Damascus, out. Tel Aviv, all the boycotts, a bit less. You have Istanbul and you have Athens. So I think that one of the, and I'm hoping that some people are doing research about that one of the issues here is, to what extent this dualism that you see, 1 million people out in one way or another, and then the European Central Bank, I just want to mention this quote, I think it's very interesting. The European Central Bank, the IMF, the financial arm of the EU, and of course Mr. Schäuble. I hope I don't offend anybody, huh? That I will bring up Mr. Schäuble a few times. I mean, he's irresistible, isn't he? You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. Declare in January 2013, pre-surplus, a question: is this mic going in and out, or is it fine? It's fine, okay, because I sort of hear it coming in and out. Declare that Greece is back on track, 0.9% growth. And this is not, but it is not a lot, but it is growth. And so my question, that sort of put me on alert. What kind of economic cleansing. You know, I'm hearkening back to this older term, ethnic cleansing, when you eliminate what you consider negatives. So economic cleansing. What kind of economic cleansing did those august institutions have to do in order to be able to declare Greece is back on track? When you had people losing jobs, losing their homes, leaving their children in churches, etc., etc. Of course, you have this duality, right? You have a beautiful. Today, when I came into Athens, I only saw beauty. People enjoying beautiful lunches in beautiful restaurants. These are these two worlds that can coexist. And it seems to me, so when I asked myself that question, I said, well, there is a lot of capital that is sitting, doesn't know where to go. If Athens is, or Greece is declared, we're back on track, imagine. That's interesting. We can go buy valuable properties in valuable whatever areas and cities, and Athens is a very critical one, given the larger geopolitics in the region. So I think that when I look at Greece, I see a kind of vanguard, partly because of the geopolitics. This is a very critical issue. Partly because, oh God, it's so far from whatever, Berlin, Frankfurt, you know. And so that is sort of the framing. And those are the two main issues really are, what is this epoch? What marks it? As you said, you know, 30 years ago, I saw this beginning of something. So in my expulsions work, I argue that the familiar, not the monstrous, not the, my God, whether this, no, the familiar, at some point takes on such extreme levels that we lose it statistically, conceptually, politically, etc., etc. So it becomes invisible in its full materiality. So for instance, I'm going to show you some slides about a peculiar outcome of the financializing of mortgages, and some of you, I'm sure, are familiar, which in the United States produced a total of 15 million households losing their homes. That's about 30 million people. The invisible, you don't see them. They're nowhere. All you see is that empty land. The Germans, we admire their economy for good reasons. It's a working economy, partly because it does manufacturing, machines that make machines, and the whole world needs machines that make machines. So that is a critical element there, in that economy. But also in Germany, this instrument has been deployed. And every year, you have between 87,000 in the last few years. So these are all very brief histories I'm describing. You have between 87 and 98,000 households losing their homes. Invisible. Most Germans, sociologists who do urban, who do whatever, they don't know it. And so I'm really intrigued by this notion that vast material conditions can be invisible. The one chapter, I should say, in this book, Expulsions, that captured me the most is one that dealt sort of with the environment, and I decided to call it Dead Land, Dead Water. Dead land, in its full materiality, becomes invisible. So today when I was driving through Athens, I was asking myself, you know, what am I seeing and what am I not seeing? About last time I was here, maybe 5 years ago or something, somebody took me, a journalist, his interview with me came out today, I think I should know his name, Tarxos Chaxis. There we go, okay. Walk me through areas, you know, that are pretty central, but that nobody goes there. I mean, your average tourist certainly, you know, with a lot of misery and drugs and all of that. So in a lot of what I'm saying, it's this side of dynamism between the material that is visible and the material, but the material that is invisible. Now, in my research practice, I've always been an oddball, it must be said, and it's not always worked out that well. But I have come to see exposed that the zone, I need a kind of a space, and I call it before method, not after method, where I can position myself vis-a-vis the object of study in the way I want, regardless of whatever the rules of the game. And you know, I have paid a price. I do like to tell this story just to support academics who are in the same situation. My first book, which is now considered a classic, so classic that some think I'm dead, especially because it has a title which is a classic, The Mobility of Labor and Capital, was rejected by 12 publishers. When I see my doctoral students today, the notion that they get rejected 3 times, they are in crises and they throw it out. I believed in that manuscript. And of course, you know, eventually that book got full recognition. So that is why I have begun to formalize this space before method. A zone of exploratory research and theorization that does not fit comfortably in the paradigm, but that somehow, if you want to, in particular epochs, in particular intersections, understand what is happening, you've just got to exit the paradigm a bit. Now, so the critical thing for me, I don't really throw out the paradigm. You can't do that. It's not, you know, but I do think that it's the fuzzy edges of paradigmatic knowledge rather than the hard core of the paradigm where the stuff is happening. It's those fuzzy edges. And I like to combine different paradigms and always work in these fuzzy edges. I can do that. Those are these in-between zone, analytic, I call them in analytic, what I can't even remember my own term, but any something that is not fully, neither fully of this nor fully of that. So a lot of what I want to talk next is in that zone, you know, the fuzzy edges, etc. And one way of designating it is analytic tactics, and here are some of these analytic tactics. So the importance not just of recognizing that powerful meanings, stable meanings, are actually sometimes becoming rather unstable, but the practice of actively destabilizing stable meanings, so the state, the economy, etc. When I look at the policies and at the arguments and the logics that shape much of the discussion coming out of the, you know, the IMF, European Central Bank, etc., around a country like Greece, I have trouble accepting that analysis. And here, let me just again mention something. When wins, and you know, his policies for the economy become clear, statements happen right after he wins. Immediately, she's very astute, Madame Lagarde, very astute. Immediately said, very short sentence, we will work with Greece. The head of the Central Bank pronounces a short little thingy that I never heard again, and that was, European austerity has not worked. Never heard him say that again. And then there was, probably under pressure, you know, don't say that. And then there was, you know, he's a Canadian. Canadians are a bit different, They are a bit more, I don't know, it's different. Probably those who are laughing are Canadians, very happy to hear that. And then there was Mr. Schäuble, and Mr. Schäuble said, a contract is a contract, we don't break contracts, a contract is a contract. It was almost a performance, a certain kind of performance artist. And then in my own research, I of course was, I knew for a fact, you know, that the IMF and the World Bank broke, i.e. changed, 46 country contracts that had to do with their debt. You know, when the hyper-indebted countries, it became clear at the end of the 1990s that the IMF and World Bank formula were not working and that something had to change. They canceled 46 contracts, and that's the HIPC, hyper-indebted. I felt like if I could only call Mr. Schäuble and put it on voice so that everybody could hear it in the room, Mr. Schäuble, those 46 contracts that were broken. So I just, there is something about the process. First, the two positive statements by Lagarde and by Kerry are important. And then the phrase by Schäuble that somehow contracts cannot be broken. At some point, they have to be broken. Now, let's see. Let me just move on now. What I want to, the last line here, I want to sort of run you now through a bit where at the heart of the matter is a notion, this is made. We made it, they made it, whatever, we make it. Rather than the outcome of, rather than a function, sort of a more abstract. I want to sort of emphasize, and I love showing this, we make, which is an ambiguous term, we make all kinds of things that are good and bad. We make this, internally displaced. They were meant to just be after the war, and now they keep growing, they keep growing. We make this. This is an achievement, you understand? In 20 years, we destroyed, the we is a very rhetorical we destroyed billions and billions of water, of cubic water. I mean, look at that. This is what is left of what was the biggest. We all know the story, right? And I stand back and I say, this is a capability. It's a negative one. You'll see where I go with this then eventually. We also made this, another achievement. This is gone. The methane that will come out from the melting of the permafrost, we have never known. I mean, these are histories that we made. So, I mean, I exaggerate a bit because there are other factors, but I hope you get the point. So that is what I'm trying to get at. It's a very exaggerated way, and you can do that in a talk, just to make a few points. Now, the 30 years history that you alluded to also, I do think that something begins to brew that entails a systemic change. In what I think is my best book, the Territory Authority Rights book, it took me 9 years. I became a monk writing, not a nun. Somehow I think there's a difference. Monk sounds more elegant than nun. I don't know why, but a monk could be a woman. Of course, there are women monks, so it's not that. So I ask myself, how do complex systems change? And they don't change by erasure of everything that preceded. They often change by, and this is one of the issues that I was really keen on tracking and understanding, by shifting certain capabilities from one kind of organizing logic to another kind of organizing logic. And I would say that this is what begins to happen in the 1980s. So it's not I was very glad that you brought it up. It's not the elimination of the national state or the national state doesn't play a role. No, it's the repositioning of certain capabilities of a working liberal state in a radically different organizing logic. It becomes very difficult to disentangle, has change happened, or are the politicians just changing everything? Whatever, because you think, my God, it's still the same system. No, so it is a kind of a task really of searching and of research. I was crawling inside particular, figuratively crawling. I was not crawling like that, but I really wanted to go to the innards of the treasury, the finance in the United States, of the executive branch of government, of et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to emphasize this. And now, to simplify the matter for the purpose of a presentation like this, one way we could ask the question is, what is the steam engine of our epoch? The steam engine being a major innovation that didn't radically alter everything, but that did, directly or indirectly, create new what is in and what is out, new orderings. I like this image that I write about somewhere. If you would have had a plane to fly over industrializing England, you would have seen mostly green. You would have said, what an adorable rural economy. In the meantime, those sheep on those lovely green pastures were, of course, now repositioned in another organizing logic. They were no longer the farmer's good. They were the merchants, the industrialists, and they were going to the factories for weaving wool, etc., etc. So this, I'm just mentioning this. So the issue here is, what is it that orders? Now, when I have a chance to hear people answer the question, what do you think is the ordering mechanism of today's epoch? The typical answer, and I'm leaving you 2 seconds to find your own answer, is the new information technologies, which is a good answer. But I say, those technologies by now are infrastructure, necessary but indeterminate, like train tracks. You can use them to carry food or to carry bombs. And we know that with these technologies. So they're more infrastructural than sort of the way in which the steam engine worked. And so I say it's finance. And finance is different from banking. And so, by the way, footnote, one of the issues at work, I think, that is emergent in your case, is not just these corporate investments in parts of Athens, whether it's foreign or national or Greek, I think is secondary. The point is it's corporate. But then also the financializing of that kind of. So now let me illustrate what I mean by finance as capability. And I think I don't have a pointer, so I'm just going to look at this curve. I just want to look at that growth curve. So this is 201, and that up there is 207, right? And this is under $1 trillion, lots of zeros, and that is 62 trillion. Think of anything that can jump so many orders of magnitude in such a short period of time. Because going from 1 trillion to 62 trillion, that is jumping orders of magnitude. That is not simply growth. And in such a short period of time. So so what I want to emphasize is a radical distinction between banking, which we all need, which is good, and finance, which is not always so good. Let me be very careful here. So traditional banking the traditional banker sells money she has. Finance sells something it does not have. And in that selling what it does not have lies both its creativity and its danger. Its creativity because it has to continuously invent instruments to invade other sectors. Danger because it has to invade other sectors. So it is radically different from banking. And one of the things for me that is very important is the need to return to more traditional banking. Every locality should really have a little bank, a little whatever, so that whatever the interest payment capacity of that locality, it can recirculate in that locality. Now what we have is extraction. Consumer banking is often in the hands of a few big banks in most countries. 70% in the case of the US is of consumer banking. That means that the capacity of the consumers to pay an interest, for instance, is captured by a big bank. Who knows where they put it? What you want is to recirculate it. I mean, that's the problem with any franchises, right? So if I think of relocalizing economies, I say, out with the franchises. find a nice mama, Italian mama, who can do a good coffee and out with Starbucks. That is what I say in the United States, because we have Starbucks and we have many good Italian immigrants who know how to make a fantastic coffee, you know, but I mean, could be any nationality. So now, just to give it a bit more context, those 62 trillion at the top, which is the value of outstanding derivatives, which is the traditional measure of financial value, is only 10% of total value of finance, which is more like 630 trillion in 2007. Today it is over a quadrillion. Well, quadrillion is even more zeros. Lots of zeros. And they're all working. They're all on the right side. Now, those 62 trillion, which is only 10% of finance, is more than global GDP of the whole world, including China, that year, 2007. Sort of right before the crisis really explodes. The crisis is already on, but doesn't explode. Now, that is one way of capturing, I hope I've managed to convey it, finance, not as money, but finance as capability. Mostly dangerous. I'm sort of practical Dutch. I look at all the things we need to do, clean up toxic land, build social housing, etc., etc. I say if they have that capacity to make something that we still count in money, let's bring it down, materialize it, and use it. That is very difficult to do with such a powerful sector. A sector that is so powerful that no government can really govern it, nor can it govern itself. But practically speaking, we cannot forget that option. My God, all that capital, let's bring it down and materialize it into something. Social housing, green transport, whatever it might be. These are the black pools, which Europe also thought it didn't have. These are all private trading networks. When the head of the central bank in the United States stepped down, his term was over, Bernanke, he said, he had a whole list of things, but one of the things he said was, and then there are the dark pools. That was his term, not my term. Dark pool sounds like. And we don't really know, he said, what takes place. Most financial trading is happening in dark pools. And it's also happening in Europe. I don't know if people can see, this is US, the dark is US, and this is Europe. So this is another dimension of finance as capability, as something that under certain conditions, like current conditions, can be extraordinarily destructive. Some of what you have lost in your economy, some of what the United States has lost in its economy, comes through that venue. We cannot not see that. This is, to me, critical. Now, what is out? I just want to illustrate now. I want to get at a very simple example. And as far as I can tell, you have these trends also happening in Greece. So I'm trying to sort of... Now, this is what I'm going to show you next, is a particular kind of instrument that was developed to give the high-level investment sector something that had an asset behind it, something real, rather than just a derivative based on an interest rate, etc. Little was left in the United States because so much had been financialized. Housing was one possibility. All that remained in terms of housing was very modest people who never thought they could own a house. They were used. This instrument was never meant to give housing to low-income people. This was a use of low-income people. Sign the contract. For this is a history that lasted 7 years, though the outcomes are more like 15 years. It's now been declared illegal, but it's circulating in Europe, including in Germany. I mentioned Germany because Germany is really the European economy that is doing the best. So that is why I mentioned, not because. Now, this is sort of very quickly, for those of you who are interested, you can read it. But the point here is that this was about using low-income people, not because they were low-income, but because they were the only ones left that could still buy a house, because everybody else more or less owns a house in the US. Those agents, I repeat, that were selling these needed 500 contracts signed in a week. 15 million contracts were signed in a period of 7 years. This was war, a deployment of agents. 15 million contracts, 15 million households. That is at least 30 million individuals. I don't know how big your country is. My country, the Netherlands, 15 million people. It's as if some voice from up there says, okay, all those who are in the territory of the Netherlands, out. Where you go, I don't know. And now we're going to repeat the exercise. That is the materiality that we're talking about. Now, so here are these so-called foreclosures, most of them, according to the central bank, Bernanke again, 14.5 million people actually lost their home. So it is a kind of expulsion. Now, these are a number, not cumulative. So in 2006, 1.2 million households. Some of these were apartments, so you had actually more than one household. Then 2007, 2.2 million, 3.1 million. Now, how big is Greece? What is the population of Greece? 11 million. So you see what we are talking about. And then it goes on, and see the first half of 2014, still 500,000. So those are the almost, it's literally 14.5 million that were out. Now, a lot of this it's invisible. It's invisible. One of the biggest homeless encampments was in Silicon Valley. And I sort of have a video that I showed to my students, and they can't believe it. And you see that they have a lot of young people. They have great sneakers. I mean, sneakers they're I don't know, they're a whole event. Sneakers, what I mean, right? And fantastic bikes, because in California you need wheels. So clearly these people they were Silicon Valley employees, right? They had, on the one hand, thought, okay, I can do a mortgage, I'll be making money. They lose everything. They keep the wheels, the bikes, and the sneakers. But they were living in publicity, for Silicon Valley. It was the biggest in the country after 2008 till today. So these are these invisible histories, that, and again, I'm here in Greece, and I just want to understand what are the formats, what are the spaces where these equivalent invisible histories are happening here. Here is another way of seeing it. The high point is in there. I want to move on. So here are the figures for Europe. Oh, I don't have anything. So if you can see, the highest foreclosure, Hungary. Hungary has had over 1 million foreclosures. Hungary is a small country. Germany is in the highest foreclosure. Spain, we all know, that is a slightly different sector, but it's also the construction company. The United Kingdom. Now, these are households. They are not families. So the 91,000 there in Germany in 2007 could be up to 200,000, 300,000, whatever. It depends, on what kind. And then among the low countries, you have, the Netherlands. This is now escalating in the Netherlands quite a bit. I don't know if people have picked up. Now, again, I don't know about Greece. I would be very interested. In the book, I actually have a more exhaustive list of all of that. But this is, and again, out. They're out. Empty houses. So one result that you have, especially in the United States, where, 15 million houses, that's a lot, is this empty urban land. Now I want to point to another mutation on urban land. And here again, this is about cities. And I just want to show you these figures. Do I have a pen that I can just point? So this is 1 year. I took 1 year. This is part of my 100 cities data set, right? 1 year. Now, New York, and this is the middle of 2013 to 2014. It starts in 2008, this growth. This is about national and foreign investment, corporate investment in properties, not in buying empty land and then developing it. That is also happening. But this is existing properties. Those properties either sit there empty. I don't know if you have any of that happening here, that you have a new owner, whether national or foreign, who buys a building, is doing nothing with it. So we have some of that in all these cities, and we have rebuilding. Often the buildings, like if you go, I always do that and I recommend that, go to new buildings in your city at night, how many windows are lit. If you go to New York and to London, a lot of those buildings are dark. They are just gaining access to that urban land and holding on. They are not necessarily right now making money. That is one of the best ways to store your money, given the kind of economic situation that we have. And I would be, again, very curious to know if anybody's doing research about this here in Athens. Now, you know, these are the top cities. You can see this is quite, some of these growth rates are far more significant than others, etc. You know, there is an enormous amount of variability. This gives you a sense that, you know, at the top here, the big cities get a lot, and then it sort of dribbles down. And again, this is just 1 year that I'm showing you. And I should say, for instance, you know, one argument that people make is when I ask, how do we describe this? How do we understand what this means? What is happening? So very common, of course, is to say it's gentrification. I'm sure you know that word, right? And of course, there is some gentrification involved in that. But then on the other hand, and let me just mention this, which is a fact, though it sounds like a little whatever, the Qatari royal, Qatar, own more of central London than the Queen of England. Now, you have two such rich houses. Is gentrification enough to capture this? And so I think not. And I really think that one issue that I want to work on, and I'm sort of working on a bit also in my expulsions book, is to focus on a whole variety of developments, including the migrations in the Mediterranean and in Southeast Asia. Is the language of migration enough to capture that? Thus, especially the most dramatic are these floating boats, which the Mediterranean is a small sea that doesn't last too long, but even 2 weeks floating seems to me quite extraordinary, sort of, you know. But what about the 7,000 that were in a whole set of boats off, you know, the Sea of Indonesia, Malaysia, etc.? 2 months floating, dying. What are we seeing when we see that? And I think that this is not as dramatic, but it's quite extreme. And I should say that for me, the city is a you know, when I define the city, I think of a complex but incomplete space, where those at the limit, there are many other things, but at the limit, where those without power get to make a history, a culture, an economy. Think of immigrant neighborhoods, for instance. When we corporatize urban space this way, and I think Athens, frankly, not the very touristic part, that all the little thingies, but that other part, that is a way of killing. You know, you have mega projects that occupy and erase little streets, you know, urban tissue, messy urban tissue. Private control, you probably don't have access. Sort of I juxtapose, I don't know if the term office park is familiar, you know, office park, a controlled space, you know. So those without power also are working in those office parks, but they don't get to make a history there or an economy or a culture. They have to be out after the work session is over. So in that sense, it may look very dense, but is it a city? And if you take a long historical time, and you certainly have that here, powerful kings have lost their head and their kingdoms, firms have gone down, governments have disappeared,
but the city keeps on living. Precisely because it is complex, it's not just one thing, and incomplete, so it keeps. And I think that these corporate mega projects begin to eliminate those capabilities, and I think that is serious for this larger project of how our history is made. Histories are not only made by those with power. So in this sense, right now, I feel that a country like Greece is actually making history. When Sherpa stands there and says, no, I don't measure the economy the way you measure it, the way the central bank, etc., the European Central Bank measure it is in terms of what makes sense for corporate investments or corporate valuations. So economic cleansing, what I already alluded to. He says, no, hey, the economy is a much broader and messier zone in a way. And I think, both if I harken back to this question of the city as its critical space, but also to the question of policy today, we cannot measure the economy simply in terms of indicators that work for the corporate sector. It just doesn't, you really de-urbanize a space and you make it rigid and it will die. Now, transversal history in the making, they can't afford to lose Athens as a platform now, because of what I already alluded to in this region. But they can really make it a very fragile, in the long term, kind of platform. Now, I wanted to, let's see. And here, by the way, and this is just if you just look at foreign investments. London then is number one, etc. That varies enormously. But you take a city like Amsterdam, you think there is nothing to buy. Look at the increase rate. This is capital in search of a function. Look at this, Shenzhen, 400, and Dubai, I thought Dubai, no, Dubai is not here, but Dubai had an increase of like 3,000 something. So you see there's enormous variability, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, I want to sort of begin to conclude by asking, are we dealing with a new systemics? And I think yes. And so this is a chart that to me is extremely interesting. So as you see, GDP per capita, look at the years, 2007, 2013, select European countries. I did not put Greece here, okay? I prefer not say too much about the country that I'm speaking in, if it's not my country. So there you can see that all these countries, France, Germany, they all had a sharp fall. It was not, Now, then they all recover a bit. Germany goes way up, and I already explained. Critical in Germany are two things. One that I mentioned, which is intermediate manufacturing, which is the most advanced manufacturing, which they are leaders in, etc., etc. And the other one is that they have still a lot of traditional banking. Not everything is financialized, partly because the vast manufacturing sector is a resistance against financializing. When you financialize, you really put that stuff in another circuit. It's at risk of suffering, etc. But look at all these other countries. They all start to go down. They have a bit of a blip up out of the abyss, and then they all go weak. And now we know that Germany is also losing ground. Now, if I had Greece here, Greece follows this curve like this, and then it has a lot of trouble. It has a little blip, and then it goes down, down, down. But just as a datum, because these are datums, they are out there, in full view, but nobody mentions them. So in the United States, they only speak about all the same thing in the UK, all the jobs they added. The US has added a lot of jobs, but, two buts, and they matter. Because I don't know, again, the figures about, I wouldn't be surprised if you also have job growth of a certain kind and then other types of job losses. So the United States, when the crisis hits, let's take 2008 as the time for measure, 65% of jobs lost were middle-class jobs. Middle, not the high, not the top, say, 30%, very high. No, the middle. And that includes also organized workers. I mean, unionized workers, etc. We have, of all the new jobs that we have created, only 25% are middle class. Most of these jobs are those 30% at the top, or they are very low. Now, this suggests a systemic transformation. The US is a very big country, and it mostly is not an export or import country, even though its exports and imports are big, but it's a very national economy in many, many ways. So again, when we begin to examine, and now that Germany, we all know that France is not doing very well, right? And so in that sense, I wanted to place Greece as something that is not way off the charts. Greece is the extreme version of what is happening. Moreover, I do think that the story with Greece, because each country has its own deep economic history. So one element in your deep economic history, it seems, in my view, is the Olympics. How... I mean, you have probably some very beautiful stuff still. That is not the point here that I want to criticize. Why did you make such a beautiful road from the airport to the center of the city? It's a stunningly beautiful road. I'm totally fine with that. No, it is how it was financed. The construction companies gained a lot, and the government, that means the citizens, were left with a massive debt. And then you have, and I quote the Financial Times, so it's not me speaking, even I may secretly fully agree with it, putting my cards on the table. But the Financial Times had this wonderful story where they say, Angela Merkel and us and we agree, and I think she and Tsipras all agree on one thing, and that is that a big, I can't remember the language, but a big issue, a big problem for Greece are its oligarchs. Oligarchs. You have a lot of very, very rich Greek. The taxation issue. Now, this could be very controversial. I'm quoting the Financial Times. I speak like a coward now, okay? I don't want trouble. I'm quoting the Financial Times, but I could not forget that quote. Let me put it that way. So now I want to show you just a bit more. This is maybe too, but if I had a pointer. Now, so this is the United, so this is, look, just stay with me on this. You don't need to understand all those lines. But this is average house price to income ratio, 2000 to 2015, etc. This is the United States. See here, so the big fall, you see the big fall, the crisis, and then it goes down. Now, average price, right? Now, this is New York. Divergence. This is San Francisco. London is way the most expensive. They're way at the top, London. And then, but the UK is much lower. So this is just a way of illustrating what I have been illustrating, which is divergences. So the 30% at the top make more money than ever, and then you have a whole bunch of other people in the middle that are really losing ground. This is another way of marking that. I have a few other ways of marking that. Look at this. So here, this is a very illustrative, and it would be very interesting for me to know if anybody has done this for the Greek corporate economy. So this is corporate profits after tax. The years that matter here are here. So here, begins the global era. Corporate profits after tax grow, they grow. Then comes the crisis and they fall. They lose for about half an hour. I exaggerate, it's more like 2 years, okay? Here's what I want to point out. After that, they are higher than before the crisis. Even as a whole other part of that economy in the United States is finished, debt. That is divergence. And that is part, I think, of this new systemics. This one is even more extreme. This is corporate assets. So again, it rises all, globalization, corporate globalization really brought a lot. There you can barely see the crisis. It lasts half an hour. A little wrinkle there. And after that, higher than before. And I think I have one more. Oh, in the meantime, our governments all are sort of getting poorer, with very rare exceptions. That is also a big deal. And, oh, I don't have that one slide that I thought I had. Okay. These are, I'm just going to drop, yeah, this one. So this is ratio of 1% wealth to medium wealth. The median always matters, you know how it plays out in a democracy, supposedly. So look at that. It just grew. Even as there are those 50 million who lost their homes, there are all kinds of people who have gotten poorer. These are the kinds of trends that we need to focus on. And again, if anybody is working on that here in Greece, I would really like to see it. Now, I am not going to talk about this because I'm running out of time, correct? Yes, okay. So I had something about land grabs and all the land and then blah, blah, incredibly amazing stuff, but I'm not going to talk about it. I want to conclude. I would like to argue this more conceptually, more theoretically, that this is indeed a period where the categories that we have used to explain, etc., are becoming very unstable, if not at times truly useless, but unstable. And so I just, you know, the growing inequality, I don't want to repeat all of this. I want to get at a little question. Who are we, the citizens? I mean, when I read some of the stuff about quite a few countries, including Greece, there are quite a few people here who have suffered extraordinary losses. Extraordinary losses. Now, we also, when I see about the persecuted, the displaced by their own governments, you know, this is a very large picture. And I sort of want to end with this slide. This is an ironic twist, so it's a nasty story. How many of you have seen this? Anybody? Okay, this is 10,000 buildings. The last one in Utah, whatever, big state somewhere there in the middle of the US, on the west, is the final building that was finished just half a year ago. This is 10,000 buildings, mostly private, that do full-time surveillance of all of us. If you have been there for 2 hours, you're in that data set. But, you know, don't worry, they'll never have the capacity to analyze it all. Now, the logic of the system is very peculiar. For my security, I first have to be suspect. You understand, right? That's the logic. I then am very tempted to ask, who benefits? Well, the tech companies, my God, this is a field day. 1 million top brilliant minds. Mr. Snowden comes out of that. Mr. Snowden is brilliant, technically. If your best algorithm builder is an Indonesian mathematician, hey, she's there. It's very international up there, adorably international. In the meantime, those of us, you know, the question then comes back, who are we, the citizens? And Europe, I think I have this slide here. Okay, no, so I don't. So let me just, I'll just keep the other one on the screen. So at any rate, you know that Germany, the Netherlands, France, all have now a surveillance system of citizens. So I want to sort of finish with a thought, and sort of a general thought. What I've tried to show to you is that Greece is part of a pattern that in many diverse ways is affecting vast stretches of a people, you know, different peoples. Not everybody. Some people are doing better than they ever did before. Our governments are positioning themselves often in very sort of peculiar ways vis-à-vis the citizens. Your government and a few other governments are really fighting, I would say, a pretty heroic battle to remark the space for analyses. In a way, I was trying to give you instruments for remarking the space of analyses. Existing measures, existing indicators take us only so far. We've got to go digging, we've got to be transversal, We can't just assume that if it's dense, it is a city, it is urban, etc., etc. So anyhow, I hope that we can have a discussion, and if any of you has charts about what I was talking about for Greece, I would love to share those. The notion is that this is an epoch where new systemics are emerging. They produce divergences inside so-called national economies. And in that sense, we need transversal, whatever word I want to use, solidarities, alignments. It's not just inside a national state, it really has to go beyond that. And I think the struggle that you have in Greece on the part of certain actors, very wonderful struggles, wonderful actors, what you have in Spain, what you have in Italy a bit, that, to me, they are beginnings of histories. Thank you very much.
Να ευχαριστήσουμε θερμά την Σάσκια Σάσεν για αυτή την παρουσίαση αυτής της συστημικής αλλαγής η οποία συμβαίνει στην εποχή μας, η οποία μας την παρουσίασε με υποδειγματική μέθοδο, καλώντας μας να συμμεριστούμε τον τρόπο με τον οποίο σκέφτεται η ίδια τα δεδομένα, τα συνδέει και τα αναλύει. Τώρα ο λόγος είναι σε εσάς. Ερωτήσεις, να μαζέψουμε κάποιες ερωτήσεις στην αρχή.
Μπορεί να γίνουν και στα ελληνικά ερωτήσεις.
Οι ερωτήσεις μπορεί να γίνουν και στα ελληνικά, επίσης να μεταφράζονται. Υπάρχει εδώ ένα μικρόφωνο το οποίο... Α, το έχετε εξαιρέσει εκεί, ωραία. Εντάξει, οκ.
So, thanks. So something you said at the beginning was about how, well, IT technologies are now part of the infrastructure. So to what extent do you think this is becoming the case for finance? That's my question. Thanks.
Well, I can answer that very quickly. What I meant by the infrastructural is necessary but indeterminate. So for finance, of course, certain parts of it are critical. More as critical, maybe even more, are, you know, the amazing algorithmic mathematics that they deploy. The back room of Goldman Sachs, where the back room used to be the place where the secretaries sit, has 100 physicists, brilliant minds. This is part of my issue, that we have these extraordinarily complex forms of knowledge deployed for, you know, objectives that are truly problematic. But when I said infrastructure, I mean that it is everywhere, directly or indirectly. If you don't have access to it, you know that you don't have. You cannot apply for unemployment benefits. I mean, there are, so in that sense, infrastructural. There were some other hands up that I saw in the back there. Okay, there is one hand, and then in the back there.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I'd like some clarification on your statement that Athens is coming back, because the way in which Athens was coming back prior to this political moment was through privatization, selling off of not just large ports, but small ports, marinas, and so forth, other things where capital can store in the period where it's waiting to make more productive investments. In this political moment, we have a government that until now is trying to struggle against that logic of privatization and that logic of Athens coming back. And in fact, I actually think that Cairo, in one sense, is coming back with Sisi on lockdown of, you know, more revolutionary currents. And, you know, the city itself is becoming the center of the Middle East stock market. So yeah, I'm just a little curious what you think about the situation now.
Right. Well, I was using it in two senses, okay? One sense is it's coming back as a corporate platform, which global cities contain that. Global cities are complex situations, you know, which have both spaces with those without history, without power maker history, and then it's also the corporate platform effect. When I said there is no way that the corporate sector is going to let Athens disappeared. They need it because, for reasons. Now, being that way of being back is truly problematic, and Sisi indeed is doing it. It means a controlled space. It means basically a deurbanized, no matter how dense it is. So I meant it when I said come back, not in the way that I would want it back or etc. Did I clarify your?
Well, if the government is able to
Well, the government, okay, fine, got it, the government. Now, I think that comes back to this other theme that I alluded to, the necessity to relocalize parts of the economy. So I have this image, that part of the project is you can do it fully, but that you pull down, bring back into whatever the locality. I don't want to say community, that's too romantic. I think most neighbors often hate each other for whatever reason, but I mean localities, whatever the locality. So bring it back. And of course, urban agriculture is a very good example. It will, in this stage, we cannot get rid of the corporate sector. But I also want to put on the table that this you didn't ask, but I just realized the corporate form is actually a pretty good form, because it is meant to create an intervening space of accountability, responsiveness, rather than just the owner. And the problem is and somebody did, a German scholar did a study where he said there are about 3,600 corporations, which are a bit these corporate giants that abuse their own power. But a lot of little corporations are fine. So when I say bring it down back, I also mean localize. So and another element for me in there is the need to return to traditional little banks, credit unions, etc. But we need the banking function. But we want to localize it. There are some slides that I often show, which show, for example, that 40% of household debt in Hungary, to mention one country, is owned by foreign banks. That's bad. You understand? That means that whatever the interest capacity, it leaves Hungary, and it's German, Swiss, and Austrian banks to a very large extent. We want to avoid that loss, what the community, what the locality generates. Let's try to maximize that recirculating. Now somebody, maybe I'm confusing with an interview that I was doing. And another issue that some of us are working at is the following question. This is now a bit of an academic issue, but I am an academic, what can I do? To what extent is the system of currency that we have today, by currency I mean it in the strict definition, issued by the central banks of countries in the world. To what extent is that type of currency a bridge into all our homes? You understand? That is the form that it would take. Right now, I have a vast amount of information also in the book that comes from IMF staff papers. IMF staff papers, I really recommend that you go to them. They're excellent, but they don't get we have access to that, but they're not published in the reports. They often have really good info. And I always say, we own the data that the IMF produces because we pay for it. Go to it, use it, eat them with your central bank. Central banks are also research institutions. Go, use it, cite it. It's our data. We pay for that research. I mean, it's an exaggerated way of speaking, you understand? But you really can cite IMF. You do not have to pay for that, and etc. Now, back to the main point. So, our local, many places have developed local currencies that are very partial. They only serve for certain transactions, etc. But I think it is not an uninteresting concept to begin to generate alternative currencies, especially, in modest situations because I do think, as I said, that official currencies in this particular economic configuration, via the debt mechanism, actually gives very powerful actors total access to our households. And and again, I repeat, the IMF papers have some very interesting stuff on this. But that's just a wild thought, you know. I have this sense that the instability that I refer to, that I think a lot of stuff is sort of bubbling beneath the surface. All right, there was another question in the back and a question, oh, okay.
I'm not sure that it is relevant, but it's a very hot issue in Greece. What is the impact on your model of property tax?
What is the what?
The impact in your model
of property tax?
Of a property tax. A property tax may rationalize the way that capital moves on.
Yeah. That varies enormously. I mean, some of the data that I present in the book Expulsions shows the extraordinary variety of mechanisms that enables avoidance of property tax under certain conditions. I think the property tax, the modest homeowners will regularly pay that. Otherwise, they are at risk of losing their property. But I can't quite give you more than that. I don't know how important it is in explaining some of the outcomes that I just don't know that. But I do know that there's a lot of avoidance. One way of doing it to another, of that. Yeah, okay.
I would like to ask you, after your description of this current situation, which is a little bit paranoid and very fragile. Yes, paranoid? Because we are living in a situation that we see the collapse of the environment, the collapse of the financial system. Yeah. We see the collapse of the political systems, ideas, Europe. So we are very afraid. And I would like to ask you, what do you think is going to be the next step? And if this transition to the new order, to the new system, global system of balance can be done without violence? Because these extremes, we have two poles, and it's very powerful now. Yeah. And these extremes maybe will clash and maybe lead us to something which is catastrophic for the whole planet. Because
right.
This is, I want to know your opinion about the situation.
Well, let me just step back and give you a slightly more abstract answer. So one formation that I see happening, I didn't talk about it, is the making of these very partial I call them geographies of centrality. And this is a process that really starts in a very clear way. They have always existed in some sense, but it starts about 30 years ago. Today, like the latest edition, but let me clarify. These are geographies that are basically corporate oriented. For shorthand, I'll say that. They cut across all divides, north, south, east, west. So for instance, part of the financial system of China is completely part of Western-style finance, but another part is not. So the last edition in terms of the city that really becomes one of these cogs where you bring in a city and you don't care about the rest of the country, so to say, is Luanda. Now, Angola has an extraordinarily poor population, a very rich elite that really doesn't care, and Luanda is now being rebuilt as a global city because it becomes a platform to deal with all the wealth that Angola has. So these are the violence. To me, it's not just physical, it's the violence of these structurations that we see. It's the violence of those people being thrown out of their homes. They didn't even ask for it, and they lose everything, So there is so much embedded violence. What happened in Greece, I mean, you have people who committed suicide because their little enterprises were going under. You have et cetera, et cetera. You know that story better. I mean, this is the violence. I cannot think about physical. There was almost a suggestion but the other issue is, of course, the wars. So I am writing a new little book, which I call Ungoverned Territories. And it has both what I just described, these geographies of centrality that are very, very partial. They just use what they want. By the way, footnote, so the imperial mode today is radically different in many ways from the old imperial mode. Britain wanted the whole of Africa, Spain the whole of Latin America, etc. Now, the land grabs, I didn't show that, all of that stuff, land grabs, people, right? They just want to use that land for as long as that land is alive, because when you make land into a plantation, it will die very quickly, and then they're out of there. This is also part of these geographies of centrality. Mostly you don't want to deal with most. The risk in a country like Greece is that that's also happening. That when the IMF, the central banks say, Greece is back on track, this is before Tsipras comes in. They are looking at these very particular geographies of centrality. They have a very narrow definition. The indicators correspond to, is it good for the corporations, is it worth investing in, etc., etc. And so violence, look, there is so much violence right now in the world. You know that the police in the United States every day kill 3 black people on average. 3. The Germans, the whole year, that was a survey that was 8, and it created a scandal in Germany. 8 people killed by the police who are here to protect us, when in the United States it's over 1,000. That is why ISIS is violence. We made ISIS. This is the interpretation that I sort of find rather acceptable. The United States contributes the way post-Iraq invasion, the Sunnis, etc., So that kind of violence is so abundant that I cannot deal with that kind of violence that is happening. So I'm just looking at the violence embedded in our economic system, and mostly economic. But this question of geographies of centrality, I think, and so for me also when I think about a country like when I'm here in Greece, what are the geographies of centrality that you have, which are protected zones that, in Athens it's visible, I would say. And that functions, and the rest sort of, who knows, that is a kind of disassembling. So I'm very interested right now in this new book on how we are disassembling territories. And I think of territory as a complex category with embedded logics of power and embedded logics of claim making. And the nation state as we have known it, why is this map going to last forever? It's not going to last forever. And you look at some countries and you see they have given up on whole areas. Forget it. The United States in its own way has given up on stuff too. This is a very, I think, peculiar moment when you begin to go digging the way I like to go digging. Sort of the emergent condition. I still think that our interstate system, that will remain as it is. It's not at that level. It's the switching of organizing logics rather than the radical reshaping of everything. All right, I'm at risk, you understand, of giving you a second little lecture. Now, I think there was one question out there in the back, I don't know, or two. Can we just handle, and some, oh my God, we're not looking at it. Can we collect some questions? Because otherwise it's not going to go too late.
Collect some questions.
Okay. Thanks a lot for your talk. I was wondering about the idea of expulsion that you mentioned briefly. In what way is it a new phenomenon, or is it a shifting of this kind of phenomenon from the so-called third world to the first world? Because probably we are experiencing now in Greece things that have been the rule in Latin American cities. We are experiencing mass poverty. Peripherias around the city are beginning to arise in Portugal, as I hear, and perhaps in Greece soon. So is there a qualitative leap in this process that characterizes a systemic change, or is it a shift of the area from the third world to the first world, or whatever? Thank you so much.
Hi, I noticed
noticed in one of the charts where we were seeing the fluctuation of the prices of properties that the ones in Germany were actually quite flat. They didn't have this big going up and going down.
Prices.
What was it?
Oh, those were not prices, those were foreclosures.
No, it was one thing with prices were going up.
Oh, that's right, the new systemics.
Yes.
Right, no. Germany has a much more balance,
yes.
Yes.
That's why I wanted to ask, it's balanced because the state is imposing it to be balanced, or why? And how much this helped to the state of today's economy?
Right.
There was another one. You had a question, we collect that one. Thank you for your wonderful speech here today. I would like to ask you two questions. First of all, whether you feel that the spring of all these that you have told us has been the free movement of capital that started in the 1970s, and this has caused the deprivation of the states from income taxes, and the fact that capitalists and the headquarters of big companies can change cities very quickly when taxes are not as they like, which is happening, and we know people of such kind. And I would also like you to comment on a phrase that a foreign prime minister visited us, I think it was in 2000, and told us, I think it was the Israeli prime minister, told us that we are entering the new world and we should not be afraid that this is the transition to a new world. And I would like to ask you if you're happening
level that there is a kind of system involved in all. Relationship is not a full